Dobry den. It's fantastic to be with you all today. Today, we're going to look at something that will change the way you think. Now, if you can think differently and you can think better, you can become better people. Now, when I was coming here, I was both feeling excited and challenged. I was excited because I can share with you today a very simple process that can make a massive difference to the way that you live your life. I've been very fortunate to see how this simple process has changed the lives of millions of people. And these people could be 5-year-old children, they could be 80-year-old individuals, they could be chief executives, they could be teachers and students. So this very simple tool can make a big difference. But I also felt slightly challenged, and I always feel challenged when I talk about what I'm going to talk about today, because mind mapping is often misunderstood, it's misapplied, and it's misused. So today I'm hoping that if I share my insights with you, you'll be able to make the most of your mind mapping experience, and you'll be able to make it as powerful as it possibly can. It's a very, very simple tool. But I just wanted to show you a few examples in this session, just to allow you to see what can be done. Now, this mind map was created in iMindMap. This map was created by somebody that wanted to map out how he could manage himself better. He just wanted to put structure to his life, and he wanted to create this map that he could use as a reference point every morning, very quickly, to get an overall picture of what he needs to do to be a better person. And we do find it's a very effective tool for motivating you, the mind map. Absolutely beautiful mind map. This mind map was done by Sharon Curry. Sharon is one of our senior Think Bazan licensed instructors, and she works in the field of leadership. She's the director of the European Institute of Leadership, and she works with large teams to help them understand how leaders should be, how they should act, how they should motivate people. And she uses mind maps to get those teams to work together. So she doesn't create this mind map herself, she creates this mind map with the teams of people that she works with. It becomes something that they all own together. This is an interesting one. People have started using mind maps for their CV, their curriculum vitae, so their the way they can apply for a role. And it's quite interesting that if somebody's applying for a creative role, this works very well. If you're applying for a more analytical role, you have to be a bit careful, because maybe the people you're sending it to aren't used to mind maps. But this is a good example of a map about yourself. And one of the things you can try when you leave today in terms of creating a mind map is do a mind map about yourself, but do it in terms of setting your goals. So you can have different goals on each branch, and then you can say how I need to achieve those. You can create lots of branches, sub-branches, to say how you can do it. Now this is the mind map I'm actually presenting from. I'm using iMindMap to present this whole presentation to you, and this is the map, and obviously we're on this slide here. Now, as a tool for presenting, mind mapping is absolutely outstanding. I remember when I first started working with Tony, I had to do my first whole day presentation with him. And gosh, I was nervous. And I spent weeks, I probably spent months creating my script and trying to learn everything. And I remember turning up to Singapore, and I had my first meeting with Tony. It was over dinner in the Shangri-La Hotel. And I showed him all my notes. I said, Tony, I'm ready to go. I am ready to go. He looked at my notes and he ripped them all up. He said, Chris, that's not the way you present. I said, Tony, what have you done? He said, that's not the way you present. He said, together, between our starter and our main course, we're going to create your whole day presentation using a mind map. And that's what we did. So if you're presenting, mind maps are so powerful because you can't get lost, you can't get stuck, you can't lose where you are. It just gives you associations so that you can just talk about what you know. It's a great way of using the tool. Now I'd like to talk about how to mind map. Now this is really important because a lot of people think they know how to mind map, but actually there's a lot more to it than you may actually realize. So let's just look. First of all, if you mind map and you're doing it on paper rather than computer, you always use the paper in a landscape mode. It gives you more space to think. But if you're ever mind mapping on paper, just be very careful, because there's a mistake that everyone makes, that they start mind mapping, they draw their central idea, then they draw their branches, and they keep going until they start getting close to the end of the piece of paper. And then when they get close to the end of the piece of paper, they start drawing smaller and smaller branches. So they've stopped being creative. At that point, they're being very selective in their thinking. They're trying to prioritize what they're putting down. And that is very, very dangerous, because you've switched into another mode of thinking. Now, this other mode of thinking is called selective thinking. Selective thinking is the greatest inhibitor of creativity in the world today. Selective thinking is all about confirmational bias. So it's about looking for information that backs up what you're thinking. So you're not looking objectively, and you're not being generative, you're being very selective in what you think. And that's very, very dangerous. Obviously, with computers, you don't have the same problem, because you have an infinite canvas. You can just keep going forever and never run out of ideas. The other thing with the mind map, compared to traditional note-taking, is if you remember the slide with the person with writer's block, pulling his hair out. Well, the reason that you get writer's block is because you get stuck into a sequence, a linear sequence. If you're using written notes, you tend to do it in a linear format. So you write your first sentence, then you write your second sentence, which backs up your first sentence, then you write your third sentence that backs up your first and second sentence. So you're setting yourself in a path from which you can never return. So you get halfway down that page, everything that you write then on backs up what you said before. So you're in a selective mode of thinking. You're not being objective. Now, that's not the way that we think. We think in image, and we think in association. So we have an image and we have an association. And this is exactly what the mind map is all about, and it allows us to do that. So you can't get stuck. You're not in a linear format. You can go off in any direction. It's actually impossible to have a mental blockage when you're mind mapping. And in Japan, I know we've got a great speaker today who will really appreciate this. In Japan, we have teachers that teach blind people how to mind map. So you may think, well, you have to be able to see to mind map. No, you just have to be able to create a visual representation in your mind. And you can do that by showing people physically through touch. And it works absolutely fantastically. Colors. How many of you like color? Gosh. How many of you are awake? How many of you like color? Everyone likes color. So, if I offered you the choice of a black and white television or a color television, you would choose the color TV, I would hope. This is so important because people are afraid to use color. They're afraid because when you're in school, you use blue or black ink. Color is for children. Yeah, that's crazy. Absolutely crazy. So when you see a mind map like this with all these different colors on it, it stimulates you. The brain likes color. It likes to be stimulated. I'm not saying the brain doesn't like black and white. Of course it does, because sometimes contrast can be amazing. But it is the contrast. It's what differentiates it from other things. So the more color we use, the more powerful the mind map becomes. Now, I see so many mind maps which are just done in one color. But if you do it in one color, it just becomes a big block of black or a big block of blue. So the associations are there, but you can't memorize them as well, and it doesn't stimulate your thinking. Words. Now, this is one of the hardest parts of really successful mind mapping, and Tony spends a lot of time going around the world explaining to people that the best mind map has a single word on every branch. just a single word. Now, in some languages, I understand in Czech, it may be difficult to do that. But the concept here is that you should use as few words as possible on a branch. And I'll show you why. If I was to say to you all, once upon a, what happens in your mind? What word came into your mind? Time. So the more words I use, the greater the direction I set you in. So if you put a sentence onto a mind map, you might as well just write in normal notes. And even if I give you a more basic example, just with 2 words, let's say we wanted to do a branch, and on that branch, we put my name, Chris Griffiths. Everything that comes from that branch is then about me. It's about Chris Griffiths. Now, if I'd split that down, and I'd put a branch with Griffiths, and then a branch with Chris, I could have the history of the name. I could have my mother, my father, my son, my daughter, my aunt. It gives me so much more freedom. It locks my ability to generate ideas. Now, obviously, if you're using a mind map for a different purpose, for instance, for memory, because you're studying, then in those situations, you might want to put a quotation or a citation or a book title in more of a box branch. But for creativity, for true innovation, try and stick to a single word to every branch. Images. Images. How many of you like to draw? There's not so many people. How many people here would feel confident coming up on stage and drawing a picture? Very few. Do you know, as adults, we get more and more afraid to draw? Do you think children are afraid to draw, or do children love to draw? They love it. They love to draw. Now, study after study shows that people that doodle or draw remember things far greater than people that don't. And it's because they're engaging more of their brain. You know, they're engaging their creative side as well as their logical side when they do that. So you shouldn't be afraid to use image. And you see there's images throughout this mind map. And an image is so powerful. An image is worth 1,000 words. An image also helps you remember things far better. Imagine this situation. Imagine I gave you a 10-page book, pure text. And in those 10 pages, it described a mountain scene. It described a vista of a series of mountains. Now, that's 10 pages. Now, if I was to give you a picture of that scene, but I was only to give you that picture for 1 second to look at, just a single second, how much do you think you would remember of the picture, and how much do you think you'd remember of the book if you had unlimited time to read the book? You'd remember almost everything in the picture. This is how powerful images are, but people are too afraid to use them. The mind map itself is actually an image. The mind map is an image. So even if you're afraid of drawing, you have this visual representation. And finally, I'm going to come on to structure, because this one always slightly angers and annoys me, because people will say to me, and it's very positive, they'll say, yeah, I love mind mapping. Mind mapping is a brilliant tool because it's unstructured thinking. I can capture ideas from anywhere and I can just put them down. That is completely wrong. The mind map is one of the most structured thinking tools you can possibly have. Everything that is in that map is all about structure. You have a central idea. That's your key point. That is your focus of your daydream. You have the colors, the words, the images, the branch. You have the associations. It's a very, very structured form of thinking. So when you use this, don't think of it as just a little bit of fun. It's not. It's a serious tool. And also, in terms of creativity, it's really important that you do have a bit of fun. Now, Socrates, arguably the greatest philosopher in history, said that there's nothing more serious than a child at play. There is nothing more serious than a child at play. But as adults, we lose our ability to play. We suffer from what's called hyper-seriousness. We have to be serious in work. We can't do things like this in work because it looks like a cartoon. That would be silly. But that is all bad thinking. It's old thinking. And you have to be confident enough to break through that. Because the people that are confident enough to do it, they're the ones that are successful. And I'll talk to you more about examples of those people in my next session.